And we'll start our first virtual AGM for the Southeast Local Enterprise Partnership. So you're all very welcome to join this morning. I'm glad to see so many of you have taken the opportunity to join us. My name is Christian Brodie. I am the chair of the Southeast Local Enterprise Partnership, and thank you to all of you for taking part. And we're looking forward to a good session. Just a few comments on housekeeping, if I could. On your screen, you're able to see our Southeast LEP board members, stroke directors, and our very welcome speakers and facilitators for the day. The meeting is being recorded, and it is an open meeting and a public meeting. So therefore, the video will be available on the Southeast Local Enterprise Partnership website after the event. Anyone with questions throughout the session can submit them through the Q&A facility, and we will do our best to answer them this morning. If we're unable to, then we'll provide an answer as part of the minutes of the meeting. Please note that there will be a sign language interpreter as part of the session, and I'd like to welcome Candice, who is here as a sign language interpreter. Please be conscious when speaking to avoid jargon and acronyms to make her job easier. Everyone can see Candice, I hope? Good. So the purpose of the meeting is an opportunity to bring all our partners and businesses together to consider the performance of the partnership over the year and to consider some of the important issues at hand as we look to the future. Clearly, we find ourselves in very different circumstances to when we began the year, and it is difficult to comprehend the amount of change we have all had to endure in recent months. During today's session, we will have the opportunity to reflect on the achievements of the last financial year. We will also touch on the position we find ourselves in now and our approach to support the Southeast economy to recover. We want to take this opportunity to explore some key issues that have shaped the last 12 months, the issues of diversity and inclusion, both in the structures of Selep itself and in businesses across the Southeast. These issues are more important now than ever before. They're only going to increase in importance over the next 12 months, and it is absolutely fitting that we consider these themes in more detail. There have been many headlines on how the current economic crisis is disproportionately affecting women. We came into this crisis with female employment at a record high. But first, school and nursery closures have removed the childcare provision that made much of that possible. Secondly, the industries worst affected by the pandemic, many of them prevalent in the Southeast, travel, hospitality, leisure, retail, tourism, have a higher proportion of female employees. And thirdly, additional childcare and housework demands have fallen more on mothers than fathers, especially among working parents. There is a risk that this inhibits work and career progression for mothers when progress is closing the gender wage gap had already stalled. We must be mindful of the impact on other groups. The sectors with the highest rate of furloughed jobs and redundancies have disproportionately affected members of the Black and minority ethnic workers. Worryingly, research suggests that some BAME groups are also less likely to have the financial resilience to help weather the economic downturn. We've secured two excellent speakers for this morning today who can help us all understand why diversity in all its forms is important for successful businesses and partnership like ours. This will provide us all with opportunity to consider how we can act in the year ahead to support this important agenda. We also want to offer as much opportunity for questions later as we can. We are pleased to be supported today by Mark Breton, who is the chair of the National LEP Network and also chair of Hertfordshire Local Enterprise Partnership, who will facilitate our questions and a Q&A session later. You can upload questions now via the Q&A function, so please do so. We're very limited on time, so I'll hand over to Adam Brown, Chief Executive of the Southeast Local Enterprise Partnership. Adam.
Thank you very much there, Chris. I've been set a couple of huge challenges by members of the team. One is to keep it really brief, to reflect on the progress over a whole year within 10 minutes, but also to avoid jargon, which is very important. So wish me luck over the next 9.5 minutes. Important to reflect on where we've got to since the AGM that we had about a year ago. The annual report has now been published. You should have received a link to the report, which is on the website. This has also been shared, or will just about be shared, in the Q&A section for anybody who hasn't seen it already. So it's well worth a look at that link. It covers our activities in 1920, so obviously goes up to the end of March this year. some of which I'll cover off in the next few minutes. It also includes financial information for the last year. Our audited accounts for the year are being presented to our board later today and will be also available on the website after that. So to reflect on key achievements during that year and perhaps since, I think looking back at the last financial year, we had a big challenge in respect of the shape of the organisation to tackle. So we transformed the LEP. So we moved to a company limited by guarantee. We sealed our position as an independent partnership, and we were able to ensure that we had structures in place that really enable us to operate in a truly transparent way. All of that is detailed in the paper. That was accompanied really by a full-scale and comprehensive recruitment process at all levels of the partnership. And what that means at a board level is that we've strengthened the leadership role played by private sector representatives, and we've improved diversity within our ranks as well. We know there's still more to be done, and we think that links well with discussions that we're going to have today. We also recruited a new deputy chair. So Sarah Dance has made a major impact on the partnership since she's been in post. You'll hear from Sarah later on too. Perhaps the most important thing is obviously the delivery of the growth deal. So the growth deal for the South East LEP runs to some £580 million. We make exceptional progress in delivering against the growth deal, and we're proud to have thanks to the hard work of partners across the area, we're proud to have maintained a really strong rate of delivery over the 5 years of the growth deal to date, and we're excited to see that complete over the course of the next few months as well. You'll see in the report we've highlighted projects such as M20 Junction 10A and the Colchester STEM Innovation Campus, projects that have been completed over the course of the last financial year. There's a lot more to see and hopefully a lot more to come as well. We've also made big steps across the skills arena. So we are one of 5 pilot areas to have launched a digital skills partnership in collaboration with DCMS. We had a great successful launch during 2019 with Google, and have benefited from some really experienced and talented people sitting on the partnership and steering our activities to support businesses and individuals in this particular area. We also established our skills advisory panel in October 2019. This is an employer-led partnership strengthening the link between employers and educators and pooling knowledge on skills and labour market needs. We continue to influence the skills agenda at a national level and drive forward further change and deliver results with employers at the forefront. Our tutor bursary programme and recent impacts on the government's provision of provider relief funding nationally are key examples of the influence that we've been able to have. Our strong partnership and proactive approach will be articulated at our skills conference next week, which you may have already registered for. I would encourage you to do so if you haven't already. That's on the 8th of October, and that will also see the launch of our £2 million Skills Recovery Fund, a new skills website, which again illustrates our strong commitment to the area. I can't move on and say much more without really reflecting a little bit on the parlous situation that we are in economically. The statistics are quite clear on the slide that you have in front of you now. They're fairly sobering as well, I would suggest. I won't go through each of them one by one, but suffice it to say that even if you look at the estimated impact on the GDP of the Selep area alone, falling by £12 billion. I mean, that equates to the size of the economy of many small countries. So the impact really cannot be overstated. It really is a challenge for our organisation, for other organisations, to ensure that we pull together and adapt what we do to make sure that our area and the rest of the UK can recover in the best possible way. The immediate response to COVID really, I suppose, has been through our growth of activity. There are 3 phases that I think I'll describe now in terms of how we've responded to COVID. The growth hub model across the Selep area. Growth hubs are about providing one-stop one-stop-shop routes to business support. We have a growth hub that's delivered in 3 different ways across our area, and it works very well. And we owe a great debt of gratitude to our partners for the effective way in which the growth hub was delivered. The pickup in access to the growth hub has been very clear and very the growth hub has been very effective at getting messages across, whether that's in response to the challenges of COVID or actually around some support around Brexit earlier on in the year. So we've been clustered with colleagues in London and Hertfordshire and have worked very effectively in partnership there to really try and do everything we can to make sure that local businesses are offered all the support they could possibly need. We anticipate that access to the growth hub is going to pick up again. That's been quite evident over the course of the last few months. And we've also managed to undertake a few surveys of local businesses to really understand what the challenges are and make sure that everything we do, whether it's linked to the growth hub or our other activities, is absolutely attuned to their needs and the challenges that businesses are currently facing. The biggest impact, the most notable impact that we expect to see over the course of the next 6 to 12 months, perhaps, is through the government's Getting Building Fund. We were really pleased to actually secure a huge slice of that funding. So we had almost 10% of the national budget for Getting Building Fund, and that is all about supporting capital projects that can deliver in the short term. So deliver within the next 18 months and play a full role in supporting the recovery of the economy. Thanks to all partners across the Selep area, we've managed to move very quickly in response to government's request there. We've got a very strong package of 34 projects that we expect will have a huge positive impact on the economy locally. Some of those projects obviously are listed in front of you. And it's an important part of what we do across the LEP and the LEP Secretariat, but also all partners locally to ensure that we deliver those schemes, and where we can't deliver those schemes, that we act quickly to make sure that we can put the measures in place to spend the money in a really sensible way otherwise. Beyond the Getting Building Funds, we've also been able to repurpose an element of our funding. So we've moved £5.5 million worth of Selep funds into the delivery of some skill support and some business support activities, which are much more closely linked to our SMEs than a lot of the activities that we normally undertake. So a lot of the stuff that we normally do relates to large capital programs. This is about smaller scale, direct impact grants for businesses to really help them through what's a particularly difficult time. And that's a really important part of our armory, I would suggest. And if hopefully we can prove the success of this and do more of it. And we'll be doing a lot to really put emphasis in government's direction on what we've done and the success of that scheme. And a lot of those conversations will be happening later today in our board meeting. Beyond that, we've published an economic response statement over the course of the last few weeks and months, which really articulates a lot of the stuff that I've just said, but makes it very clear what the LEP has done to respond to the issues brought about by COVID. In the medium term, we're gearing ourselves towards the development of a recovery and renewal strategy. So you'll be aware, and we discussed before, that we've produced in the past a draft local industrial strategy, which was all about how the LEP organises itself and what direction it points itself in to really deliver against the aims of government and make sure that we spend our funding in the right way and we do what our local businesses require of us. We were just about to publish the lists back in March, but obviously the best thing to do now would be to take account of all the economic intelligence that we've accumulated over the course of the past 6 or so months, meld that together with the document that we had originally, and make sure that we produce a recovery strategy that's really closely linked to the specific needs of our local economy, closely linked to our capabilities as an organisation in terms of what we can execute and those powers that we've been given. And perhaps most importantly of all, completely reflects the aims of our partners across the area and makes sure that we are, as an organisation with a good route to government, that we are really emphasising the things that our local partners want to deliver, and we are playing our part in adding value in that respect as well. The last thing I'll say before handing over to Mark is to reflect on where we are with some of our partners. So we've been working across, and I appreciate I've gone slightly over time, apologies. We've been working across Southern LEPs, so all of our neighbouring LEPs for the course of the last year or so. We're starting to formalise that a little bit. That partnership is now called Catalyst South. It's really exciting. It's about really putting our agendas together to try to identify where we can add even more value in working together and encourage investment in this part of the country. It's a really exciting step forward, and Mark will talk more about it in a second, I'm sure. One last statement from me as a handover to Mark. It's evident to me, it's evident to all of my peers and everybody involved in LEPs that we've had, the LEP voice has been heard a lot more clearly, perhaps over the course of the last year or so. We're getting a lot more traction with government. They're a lot more responsive to the messages that are coming from the businesses across our area that we're able to funnel in their direction. And that is thanks in no small part to the gentleman I'm just about to introduce, Mark Breton, who is the chair of the National LEP Network, and is going to help us today in hopefully fielding some of your questions as well. So I'll hand over to Mark, and thank you.
And Adam, thank you for your gracious comments. I hope you can all hear me okay. I had noticed actually that people were concerned about not being able to see the sign language. If you click in the top right hand corner and go to speaker view, you should now be able to see Candice. And I think that's a great initiative, particularly given the topic of the conversation today. Just as a follow-on to your points around collaboration and so on, I mean, you've played, all across all of my colleagues a great part in helping us make these significant steps forward. As the chair of the network, but also chair of LEP and the Catalyst South leadership team, I just want to give you just a couple of national overview comments before I start to take questions. I think Adam's already said, we are now very heavily engaged and have been for many months now in response to the virus, influencing government policy. This includes a number of us sitting on Secretary of State and ministerial task forces, working groups, and yesterday I was at a select committee discussing the levelling up agenda. Nationally, we've secured a major increase in growth hub funding, which is where the real interface happens, particularly with our small and medium businesses, and we've taken that from 10 to 72 million. And they are, obviously, these businesses are key to the recovery, and this has included a range of grants, support, and training and mentoring schemes. As you've already heard from Adam, we've been entrusted to deliver the £900 million Getting Building Fund, which has shown that we have significant pent-up demand for more projects when government is ready. The network launched a 5-point plan for recovery, and it links really well to your economic response statement, and again shows how everybody is collaborating across the network, and particularly focusing on recovery and renewal. We submitted a response last week to the comprehensive spending review consultation, building on this plan, offering ideas on a holistic approach to levelling up, but also ensuring that we get a proper settlement for LEPs, which has been a long time in the wings. Catalyst South as a group of LEPs is being led by Chris, and there have been a couple of sessions with ministers and businesses. This grouping is well regarded and having a more significant influence as a collective voice and as a counterweight to the north, because levelling up is a holistic challenge for the whole country, with some of the most deprived areas sitting indeed in Southeast LEP's own region. And this is exactly, I think, where you would want us to be collectively. So I'll just explain quickly how the Q&A function works. If you submit your questions, and I've seen a couple already in the Q&A section, which is at the bottom of your screens. If there's a question that's been submitted you'd like answered, you can upvote that question by clicking up on the thumbs up option. I'm going to be given some guidance by the team. I think first question is prepared. and let's have a little look and see what we've got. So it appears young people are being left behind during the crisis. Smaller businesses may be keen to get involved in the Kickstart scheme. However, with the recent announcement to return to working from home, many feel it won't be possible to take on young people in office-based roles, as it won't be possible to provide the training and support they need. What's the view of the directors? Is there more we could be doing? And thanks to Ellie Clow for this question. So I'd like to first bring in Graham Peters and then Anna Christie. Graham, if you're there.
Graham, you're on mute.
Yes, not really my sector, young people, although absolutely behind encouraging more initiatives for them. I think Anna's probably going to be far better placed to answer this particular question.
Hello there, everyone. Yes, so we are acting as an intermediary through the Kickstart scheme, which is a new scheme that has been brought out by government. It's a £2 billion scheme to help fund businesses that want to provide a job placement to a young person aged 16 to 24 who are currently on universal credit and struggling to find employment. So this scheme will fully fund the 6-month job placement, paying national minimum wage for 25 hours a week, and also include the national insurance and pension contributions. The business will also receive £1,500 towards setup costs, training, development. And so as an intermediary, we can help pull all of these together for businesses. Unless you have 30 placements yourself, as you can go directly to government portal and apply yourself. But if you have less than 30 placements, this is where the Sussex Chamber and Kent and Victor Chamber and Essex Chamber are all acting as intermediaries to help businesses provide this scheme, which is really essential to help young people get on the career ladder. And we are working with local colleges, universities and training providers to help provide the much needed skills. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Anna. Could I ask Angela O'Donoghue to give her views, please?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. In response to your question, I would say that young people, as you can see from all the data, are being significantly impacted by what's happening with COVID. They appear to be the most impacted right the way along, which is really unfortunate, and they're having a really rough time at the moment. Even those who are going to university, you will have seen on the news and all the rest of it. I'm going to say the Kickstart scheme is good. There are a lot of intermediaries around. It might be useful if the LEP could produce, once we know, a list of all the intermediaries, so people can then choose which intermediary they'd like to go to, because we as a college are acting as an intermediary as well. And the question was about, it's very difficult to take on a young person if they've got to work from home. And we're also finding that with apprenticeships, because the other alternative is to take on an apprentice. And we have got apprentices at the moment who are working from home very successfully with support from the college and from the company that they're working for. So there are different options for young people. So if you as an employer want to get involved, it's worth talking to somebody, worth talking to an intermediary, talk to your local college who are also working with the chamber, and see what are the best options for you as a business in taking and providing some support for a young person. It could be, if you can't offer the Kickstart scheme, you might be able to offer at a distance work placement for young people. There are lots of different things and lots of different programs out there to support young people. And it's quite difficult if you're an employer to get your head around all the different offers there are, because there seems to be things coming out all the time. The Kickstart scheme will be useful. And it will be useful for some young people, but it isn't the answer for all young people. So if you do want to get involved with supporting young people, please talk to one of the intermediaries, because there might be, if you can't take on somebody through the Kickstart scheme because it doesn't work for your company, there are other alternatives and ways in which you could support young people.
Thank you very much. And of course, as well as what's happening with the virus, we've got the EU transition on the horizon. If I could ask a question now of Perry Gladding, what are businesses in your area saying they need as we move into transition, and what more could businesses be doing?
Thanks, Mark. I think one of the greatest frustrations out there for business is that we're only 29 days away from a potential exit with a deal or a no deal. So if businesses have not already started the work on identifying what's required from them, they really are up against it from a time perspective. But what I would say to them is get on the government websites. There is some detailed documentation starting to appear there now. Look at that. If there are particular areas of frustration, and we're already hearing that within the Selep area on things like export licenses and customs formalities, get back to us as the Selep, feed that information into us, and also through the Chamber of Commerce as well, who are very active in this particular area. And I'm sure Anna has got something to add to this. But with time against us here, with a deal or a no deal scenario of nearly 29 days, time is absolutely precious for businesses to get as well up to date as they can. So as frustrating as it is, go to the government websites, talk to the local chambers, come back to the Selep, and we will continue to lobby government on what is required here in a very short timescale.
Thanks, Perry. And I wonder whether Clive Soper from the Federation of Small Businesses might like to add your own perspective.
Yes, thank you. All I would say is that the FSB is a national gateway for the UK's government's Kickstart scheme, and we're encouraging small businesses to get involved and help support young people with job placements in England, Scotland and Wales. We've teamed up with Adecco, a national company working ventures to become an official intermediary for the government's £2 billion Kickstart scheme, which will play a key role in rebuilding the UK's economy and supporting young people into sustainable employment. So the FSB is totally committed now nationally to the Kickstart programme.
Thank you very much indeed. I think we've just got time for one more question, because I know the guys have got a lot to do today, and I'm going to put this question to Councillor David Finch from Essex County Council. Since digital connectivity has been so important to business resilience and is particularly crucial for developing our digital economy, can you provide more details on what's been done to accelerate investment in digital infrastructure, as mentioned, as part of your approach to the Getting Building Fund? David, are you there? No, seem to be missing. And Adam, perhaps if you could pick this one up, so I'm sure you're very fully engaged with this one on the digital approach, please. And you're on mute still.
It's all right, I noticed. Yeah, so we recognise that digital connectivity remains an issue, and some fundamental elements of that remain an issue across the patch as well. Mobile connectivity in certain parts of the LEP is trails way behind what you would hope it would be. So the Getting Building Fund gave local areas an opportunity to put bids in for funding that addressed some of those problems, particularly in rural areas, supporting the rural economy and the resilience of businesses who are set up in rural parts of the patch. So a good swathe of that Getting Building Fund is being geared towards addressing those issues, and that goes across the whole area as well. I think it's important for us to really build on the back of that and make sure that that translates into our recovery and renewal strategy, and we continue to make the case for investment in digital connectivity generally, because we can all talk very comprehensively and with some enthusiasm about the potential impact of 5G and having a full fibre network everywhere. But I think it's fair to say that there are still some fundamental gaps in certain parts of the patch that we need to address. And it's great that we've been looking to do that through the funding that we've recently had. So it's a continued fight for us, and I think it becomes no less important now, because obviously when you have things like AGMs for huge LEPs on computer screens, I think it demonstrates actually that, you know, this is going to be the future way of working, and much more so than in the past. So it's something we absolutely need to get right.
Okay,
So,
thank you, Adam. I mean, I had my own AGM last week. I mean, it's a slightly longer affair. We had about 3 hours and 200 people, and it's always a good measure as to how many are still there when you reach the 3-hour point. So we've come to the end of our quick Q&A slot today. There are quite a few questions either in the chat or in the Q&A section. I'm sure the team will be delighted to pick those up. If I can just close by again thanking you for the opportunity to take part this morning. I'm becoming almost, that feels like an honorary member of South East Selep from time to time, supporting Chris. It's my great pleasure. I wish you a great successful conference for the rest of the day, and thanks for having me on board.
Mark, thank you very, very much. I would like to reciprocate by saying that, well, firstly to say the quantum leap that the LEP network has made under your leadership over the last year has been extraordinary. The engagement we now have at all levels of government is down to you and down to Mark Livesey as well. So, and the support that you give us, and in particular the personal support that you give to Selep, is outstanding. So I wanted to place on record my own personal thanks, but also the thanks of my board here to all the work that you do for us. So thank you.
You're very welcome. Thanks very much indeed.
Good. So as Mark said, there are some very important questions that were raised. I'm sorry we didn't have time to go over them, but the team will get back to you to address those questions. I'd like now to introduce Denise Wilson, OBE. Denise is the Chief Executive of the government-sponsored Hampton-Alexander Review, which leads the National Business Focus Task Force and voluntary framework for increasing the number of women on FTSE 350 boards and also in leadership positions. So Denise, over to you, and thank you very much for spending time with us today.
Thank you, Chris, Adam and Zoe for inviting me to speak today. I'm very pleased to do that, and thank you to all members who are here on the call for all of your work during the year. I was just looking last night at some of the projects and the work that's been underway in this last year, and it is really some very important work, not least in the light of COVID, around innovation, around education, health hubs, and using commercial properties that are empty, etc. The list goes on. And I do firmly believe that through COVID and our recovery from that over the next 2 years, that local community, local partnerships, and what is happening in your local area as opposed to nationally or even internationally will become much more important than it ever has done as people turn to their own communities and for support, actually, and hopefully for supplies, infrastructure, and much more. So today I'm going to talk to you about inclusion. I'm Chief Executive of the Hampton-Alexander Review, which I'll talk a little bit about that. I'll talk a bit about COVID and how that has impacted progression for women, actually not just women, anybody who is different in the workplace. What some of the businesses, those businesses that are making most progress are doing right now. So what is best practice? And then those leading, those on the sort of leading edge, what they're doing, and a little bit about what you can all do. And everybody has a part to play in this, an important part to play in this, in order to help ensure that progress continues. So let me start with the UK's journey, which got serious on this subject in 2010 with the incoming coalition government, David Cameron, Nick Clegg, who commissioned Lord Davis to do a 6-month study on why did we have so few women in British business leadership, given over 50% of our graduates were women, 50% of the workplace was women. We had more than 50% lawyers, accountants, women qualifying every single year, yet they were, and achieving accolades in areas of education and elsewhere, but so poorly represented at the top of British business. And at that point, there were 150 to the FTSE 350. There were over half of those boards were all male boards, and the representation of women on those boards was just at 9%. Recommendations came out for a voluntary route. Unlike the rest of Europe, the UK has chosen a voluntary persuasive, comply or explain route to achieve progress, which so far has been working. Progress is much slower, I think, than any of us would like to see. but the insights that we have around the complex and compounding barriers that face not just women, but actually anybody who presents differently to a senior white male are significant and are proving very hard to for people to understand and to overcome. So although progress has been good so far and the framework we have is working, there is still very, very much more to do. Now, the focus of the first review was a 5-year review, setting a target for boards of 25%, which was achieved in 2015. The second successor review, which is the review of which I'm Chief Executive, is now coming to a close. It's in its 5th year. So that set a target of 33%, a third of women on not just FTSE boards, but also going down into the leadership layer, the important leadership layer. Capturing 23,000 leadership roles in British business of public listed companies. And the review, which is government sponsored by BEIS and the Government Equalities Office, tracks and measures every single appointment within that 23,000 leadership layer in and out over time. So although it's levied on FTSE companies, they're often a bellwether for what is happening or what the expectations are in the rest of business in the UK. And we have seen in many, many other sectors, in education, in health, in the arts, in the church, that a third and increasing the number of women in senior leadership positions has become a core business topic and initiative. And whether businesses are large or small, all leaders are now expected to know and understand and be doing something to address the shocking lack of talent, not just women talent, but as I said, anybody who presents differently, Black, ethnic minority communities, disabled, young, and very old, and those of different sexual orientation and preference, anybody who presents differently to a senior white man. And if you're, and we'll pick up on this a little bit at the end, as a leader, nobody really wants to look like they don't quite get or understand this conversation, or they're kind of fearful of having it because they don't have the right language, they're not informed enough. So it's becoming a core business topic that everybody is expected to be abreast of. So in terms of just finishing on progress, where are we now? Well, 34% of FTSE 350 board positions are occupied by women, around 10% of women are chairs, around 33% women are deputy chairs, i.e. the SID role. CEOs, that very top job is still going slow. We only have 8 FTSE women CEOs in the FTSE 100. And why is that? Well, we'll go on to that in a little bit. I think basically what we're seeing is what we saw at the very beginning, whereas these roles that were on boards were deemed the preserve of senior white experienced men, and women were either not interested or weren't qualified enough, didn't have the right kind of experience. These were very precious held jobs. And I think you know, the CEO job, certainly in a big FTSE listed company, is still seen in that it is the pinnacle. There are only 300 odd of them in the country, and it will be the last hill we have to climb. But and we're not there yet, but we will get there. So I think, you know, what I've seen in my, as I said, in my career is something that has been a bit of a fringe topic that was held low down in I&D, that was, you know, for a senior woman in business. I worked in the oil and gas industry. Was to talk about women or the lack of women in leadership was a career limiting conversation to have with anybody, actually. And it was one of those things that happened around the water cooler. I think, you know, what I'd say is progress comes in many forms. And the fact that we're even talking about this subject here at your AGM is one of those forms of progress. So the numbers matter. Of course, the numbers matter and tracking the data matters. But actually the end game is to create a really inclusive culture where everybody, irrespective of their difference, feels they can give their best, do their best work and feels valued, and that they have an equal chance at every opportunity, but in particular those high earning, high status opportunities for which many people are qualified, You know, supply is not the issue, but opportunity for people who are different is. So let me just, with that, then move on a little bit to COVID and the impact of COVID. You know, so although, as I said, we've never seen a stronger group of women, both in post and in the pipeline, we know that we've still got a very long way to go to build that pipeline, and you know, a decade on, I would say our understanding of this subject is very deep and very rich, and that's one of the advantages of the UK having gone a voluntary persuasive route rather than legislation. We've had to work very hard to convert on an individual basis many, many leaders to the value of diversity and why they should be picking from the whole of the talent pool, and why that matters for their reputation, and why that matters for the quality of the debate, and why that matters to when they're trying to recruit talent from overseas, and why that matters for the reputation of British business. We've worked very, very hard on that business case. Today, I'm pleased to say, and again, is that, you know, this is progress. I rarely am asked, what is the business case for diversity? It's all about, how do I do it? What do I do? Can you help me? And that in itself is progress. So, you know, look, I think COVID has hit us all broadside, that's for sure. And we need to be very careful not to lose those hard-earned, and they are hard-earned, and gains that we've seen in diversity. But, you know, I think there are advantages here too. The enforced use of technology has shone a really harsh spotlight on that wasted time commuting. All of those, you know, super executives traveling around the world for this important business travel. The daily commute and the cost of that, not just in economic terms, in terms of the share of our wages, but in terms of the public health and in terms of mental health and everything else. So I think some of what we've seen through home working has been good, and hopefully we'll see that endure. And I'm certainly in favour of a hybrid work, back to work. And building back better, and we have every opportunity to do that. We just need to grasp these opportunities, and it will take bold, morally courageous leaders in order to do that. And that's, I think, where you all come into this. You know, also it has helped break down some of those really unhelpful things around presenteeism and who collects the coats, the coffees, busted a lot of those myths about how effective is home working. And we've seen some fabulous, fabulous women leaders. Jacinda Ardern, Nicola Sturgeon, the 4 Nordic Prime Ministers, the Prime Minister from Taiwan, all with a very new style of leadership and getting great traction. But, you know, we do need, as I said, we do need to take extra care to make sure that we don't lose those hard-earned gains. And that's about data. It's about absolutely monitoring in a very detailed way the ins and outs of your organisations, who's staying, who's going, who's so that women, anyone who presents differently, are not overrepresented in furloughs and redundancies, because it will take many, many years and create a very dispirited workforce if we are to build that back up. So let me talk then next about, what those companies that have made great progress, and around half of the FTSE 100 companies are now at what I would call gender balance. So that's 40% women on their board or in their leadership team. And they're not happy with a 33% minimum target. They're really pushing for something more than that. What do those companies have in common? So they have a clear plan of action. This is part of their strategic ambition. This is not, as I said, some little sideline or something somebody does off the corner of their desk. They appoint senior leaders. It's taken on seriously by the chief executive, by the chairs, and generally there's an executive director in charge as well. It is owned by the business, not owned by HR, and they set targets. And whether you like targets or not, they are effective. They tell people who've got more important things to do in their day job than worry about this, what good looks like. They give them something to aim for, and they give them something to rally the organisation around. If we can get to that by this date, then that's good enough. And then we'll worry about the next stage of the journey afterwards. Plus, they encourage data. They encourage the keeping of data, and basically they are the language of business. Nobody wants to miss a target. So they are really important. Look, you've got to have a reasonable budget. The number of organisations that talk about the size of their advertising budget compared to the size of their budget for creating inclusion and diversity in their culture. And it's pathetic, frankly. And organisations have to be prepared to put some money and some serious resource behind this. And those that are making progress consistently have all done that. They are purposeful and committed. The voice of the leader matters most. The voice of the chief executive, when he talks about this, everybody listens. When the chair talks about this, everybody listens and lines up. But until they get it, and until they really understand this subject properly and have the confidence to speak about it in public, then people are, are all floundering in different places. So I'm often asked what's the one thing that matters, and it would be that. But it's not just their voice. We've luckily gone beyond the stage where people can just trot out the right line. And again, that's another great sign of progress, actually. In a way, it makes my job much harder, because everybody I come across, every leader I come across, says, yes, of course I get this. I've got a daughter, I've got a whatever. We're way past that, actually. What are you doing about it? And what really matters, and how we tell what a chief exec or a chair is doing about it, is whether the representation of women, of people who present differently to senior white men in their leadership groups, are increasing year on year. And when they're not, then they don't get it, and it is just talk. And obviously as well, the last thing organisations are doing is involving everybody in the organisation. So they go to the supervisors, to the team, and say, this is the output we want, this is what we want a more diverse team, you come back and tell us how you're going to do it, rather than cascading down from the top. So what else? What else are companies doing? They're going to that really hard stuff, that behaviour stuff. They're starting to tackle gender stereotyping, all those unhelpful myths, actually, like women lack ambition. Women don't lack ambition, actually, and as women get older, their ambition gets greater. They're just very stressed and need some support in balancing responsibilities. Women leave in greater numbers than men. There's no data that shows that, actually. More likely women just get stuck. They just sit and stay there. Women don't have confidence. I mean, just look around the women in your own network, your daughters, your family, your neighbours, people in your team. Do they lack confidence? No. In themselves? No. As women? No. This is not generic. They lack confidence in the leadership. When they look up, they don't know how they fit into that group, because they don't see anyone who looks or behaves like them. And that's the confidence issue, and that's what organisations who are really serious about this are starting to tackle. They're tackling selection and the bias they're tackling bias in the selection process, and for sure we know that's happening. Look, all the work we've done and all the progress we've made on FTSE 350 leaders, still today in 2020, 10 years on, 65% of the leadership roles are still going to men. 65%. So, we have a long way to go, and for sure, we all have biases. I have them myself. Everybody carries around with them their own biases. We all like someone who looks like us, speaks like us, thinks like us, but that isn't right for a good, strong team, and that isn't right for efficiency, for the economy, for using all of our talent, and for getting the very best output. There are many, many studies, which I won't go into, on the benefits of diverse teams over homogeneous teams. We look too often for a name, who's known, who knows who. The number of times I've sat on boards and we've got a vacancy in there. Do anybody know anybody? We put some hands up. That is not how you recruit different people. That's how you recruit people like yourself. So there's something about beauty in the eye of the beholder, and this is very much part of the education that's going on now in business. Unhelpful behaviours, those what are called microaggressions now in the workplace. Again, this is a sign of progress. We had no name for this only 2 years ago. Most people didn't even know what a microaggression is. Well, if anybody's still wondering, it's those really annoying things that happen in the workplace every day that if you happen to be different, you get in spades. They're called micro, they should be called macro, because actually, when you get them regularly in an aggregate, day on day, then they are pretty painful, actually. And they're things like men speaking over men, women speaking over women, asking a second or third generation British-born person, where do you come from? Not knowing or not understanding how to pronounce people's names. Somebody in your team who does all the work, all the slides, all the prep, never gets invited to the meeting. They're not properly acknowledging when people come into the room, not even stopping your conversation to say hello or to try and join them. And, assuming always that it's going to be the women that take the coats, get the coffee, that kind of thing just grinds people down and makes anybody who is different leaving. And retention is as big an issue, in fact, a more important issue, retaining people who are different in the workplace. You need to put more effort into that than you do recruitment. Allyship, they're working hard on creating allies out of their workforce. So that's creating rather than a bystander, i.e. someone who watches, feels a bit uncomfortable, doesn't know quite what to say, they're creating upstanders out of those people. So they're doing not unconscious bias training, that's kind of much discredited these days, and where we were about 7 or 8 years ago, they are doing upstander training, which means giving people the language, dispelling that fear of how do I talk about race in the workplace? How do I speak to people who are very different from me, who are women, who are black, who are, and giving them some tools to do that, giving them some tips and some strategies. So, ask people how it feels to be black, how it feels to be a woman, how it feels to be a maternity returner, how it feels to be in a wheelchair and have to come into this office every day. Really, the wealth of information on how you make people feel included is already there in the workplace. We just need our leaders to step up and get some tips and tricks and really inform themselves on this subject, like they would do any other business subject, like they'd learn about finance, like they'd learn about a new accountancy rule coming in, like they'd learn about a new governance rule or a new health and safety rule. This is a subject that's not innate. None of us were born understanding how to treat people who are very different from us. We have to learn, and you have to be prepared to invest the time in that. You have to be prepared to pick up some of that research that's out there. There is a myriad of research out there. There is every single week a PwC, a KPMG, a Freshfields publish something about diversity in UK business. Who reads it? A fraction of the population, a fraction of the business population. Caroline Criado Perez, Invisible Women, the FT Business Book of the Year. I could do a show of hands. How many people have read it? It was the FT Business Book, not diversity book. I saw one hand, great. 2 hands. Most people have not even read it. The FT Business Book of the Year, because it's got women in the title. We've got to get over that. And diversify your feed. Start following some different people. Start following, if you only follow sport, politics, business, then you're not going to be able to join this debate very well. You're not going to be able to understand what people are talking about. You won't understand Black Lives Matter. You won't understand the BBC Gender Pay Gap. You won't be able to have a confident, credible, coherent, informed conversation with people in your team. You'll be in a huddle in the corner in the kitchen with your family. And that's what we need. I'm asked, what is the next step? What is it now? We've got targets, we've made progress, we've got this understanding. What is the next thing? And actually, the thing that will take us in the next 5 years to really banishing this subject forever is getting all of our leaders, whether they work in big businesses or in small businesses, getting everybody to play their part in creating an inclusive culture. And you do that by informing yourself as a leader and by creating an environment in which everybody, irrespective of their difference, can give of their best and feels comfortable. And that starts with small steps, but it starts with people like me, but clearly you all have a huge opportunity there too. So I would just say this subject is not innate. You do need to take the time to inform yourself. We have made great progress. There is no shortage of information out there. Get Michelle Obama on your feed, get Jacinta Ardern on your feed, start looking at some different people and changing your conversation. And that will help not just you and be a modern reconstructed leader, but will help everybody in the workplace and ultimately society. And we can, for sure, hopefully in 5 years to 10, stop talking about this subject. But it starts with you and it starts with small steps. So thank you very much.
Denise, thank you very much. That was interesting and challenging. The reason I read the book was that was my wife's an academic, and she teaches some of her teaching and research interests are in this subject. So I have it wasn't a book I would normally have come across, but for her reading and saying you have to read this book, and it is so mind broadening about the sorts of issues that you've been talking about. So thank you very much for that. And I think it's very helpful for us to understand the approach being taken by government in addressing representation within the FTSE 350. And you've set out some great lessons that can apply to all sizes of businesses, frankly. It is clear it's not just about positions on board, but also leadership and providing opportunities in a fair way across whole organizations and businesses to provide these routes to higher levels of a corporation. From a Southeast LEP perspective, we need to create an environment which encourages local businesses to embrace this message. After all, we're talking about half the talent pool here, giving it a fair opportunity to half the talent pool. And also today goes somewhere in helping everyone understand what can be done to encourage balanced representation, which will in turn support future representatives coming forward to be involved in boards and indeed the working groups of the LEP. I just want to remind everybody, there will be an opportunity for questions later. So if you could please submit them on the Q&A function in the usual way, we will start to collate them. And I want to introduce Kit Awewewu, who is the CEO, the Chief Executive of Mindweaver, which works to help tackle the digital skills gap while bringing those from underrepresented, underutilized, and underemployed groups into the world of emerging technology. Kit is also the diversity champion sitting on our Southeast Digital Skills Partnership. So, Kit, over to you.
Thanks, Chris, and thank you, Denise. That was great. I'm glad I was on mute because I was loudly agreeing with a lot of what you were saying there. So, and I also want to echo your thanks to the work that the LEP is doing. So I'm really pleased to be speaking with you all today. So thank you for having me. I've been helping organisations and tech leaders make connections between diversity and innovation for some time now. So when I was asked to do the same here, I thought, brilliant, I can do that. But as I made my way through the points that I wanted to discuss with you all, I realised that this was actually the same conversation I've been having for years. And it's interesting when Denise says that we've moved past the point of the business case, because we are still having to have those conversations in some quarters, but there are books, there are reports, there are articles, there are journals that all outline the fact that diversity in a team equals greater problem solving capability, or that companies with more diverse boards are more profitable, that diversity fuels productivity and innovation and cultural harmony. The benefits of diversity are huge. Some great work is being done to spread that message, which is fantastic, but we are still having to have that conversation, and we've been having it for years. So the question in my mind shifted from why is diversity important for innovation to what are we doing about making diversity, equality, inclusion and anti-racism a reality, and where do we as a LEP stand, and how do we relate that to our work on digital skills? Before COVID, if we can remember such a time, there was a sense that we were moving in the right direction, though, and I definitely agree with Denise there. There was a long way to go for sure, and we were still seeing some resistance to change in some quarters, but it felt like we were seeing a shift towards a more open and positive dialogue about the impact and the need for diversity and inclusion. I will say that most of this constructive conversation centered around gender, and latterly neurodiversity, the least controversial or difficult of the diversity characteristics. But either way, conversations were happening and incremental steps were being made. And, I was speaking with CEOs and CTOs, founders and leaders across public, private and third sectors about incorporating equality, diversity and inclusion into their tech thinking. It was great, a challenging but genuinely exciting time to be working on the border of diversity and technology. And then COVID happened. With COVID, lockdown, complete shift in working practices, everything changed. And of course it did. Businesses had to focus on survival, adaptation, cut costs, make efficiencies, reevaluate, and attempt to plan during a time of immense uncertainty. And it was, actually still is, an incredibly challenging time for many organisations, and that can't be overstated. But what's doubly unfortunate about the current time is that there is a pattern in this deprioritization and cutting. You know, consistently being cut is the company EDI agenda, the equality, diversity and inclusion, remember Candice, agenda for funding, or, you know, and the attention paid to equality, diversity and inclusion initiatives. You know, this is actually the time that we need to be focusing on those things the most. The confronting part about the kind of early COVID period is that it did expose the fact that despite some of those gains that Denise has been talking about and that we've all been celebrating, for some businesses, equality, diversity and inclusion is still just a nice to have, maybe even just a PR activity, you know, skin deep, something that we should be seen to be doing rather than a critical element of their business operations or their culture or their growth strategies. And there are some notable exceptions. There are companies that are really focusing on this, but this is definitely something that we can't ignore. You know, all of that is the case despite what we know about its contribution to overall success. And this isn't limited to the current crisis. You know, previous crises too have shown us that when times get hard, diversity and inclusion either slips off or is pushed off the agenda. And if we're completely honest, it is likely that if the world hadn't watched, you know, the slow murder, you know, of an unarmed Black man by police officers in the United States, and then borne witness to the social unrest and the outrage and racial injustice that followed, we might still be there. We might still be in a place where diversity and inclusion was taking a back seat in the journey to recovery. And people wouldn't be using the term anti-racism or microaggression with the same kind of regularity that they are now. We certainly wouldn't be having the kinds of conversations about systemic and structural racism that we're having now, if not for George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter protests. And the space that that's created for some much needed conversation also wouldn't exist. And we should take the time to process that. It's taken this to get diversity fully back on the agenda in this time of crisis. So with that in mind, and with the mandate that the Selep has to identify and support local strategic growth priorities, to encourage business investment and to promote economic development, I thought, well, let's take the conversation forward beyond why is diversity good to what are we doing to ensure that diversity, equality, inclusion and anti-racism as a separate component, which it should be, is a reality for the businesses, the communities and the groups that we support. We in the Selep and wider, I'm really glad to be a part of the Selep, by the way, you know, need to take an unequivocal stance. And we need to have a clear plan of action that supports our intent. And we have to ensure that it's a central component of the work that we do, even and especially as we plan for recovery and renewal. You know, as the pandemic has unfolded, we've talked about this a little bit, it's been really clear that its impact is different for different groups. And that's whether we're talking about health outcomes or financial or social impact. We know that in companies where the jobs go, more women go than men, more Black and brown people than white people, more older people than younger people, unemployed people with disabilities are finding it even harder to re-enter the workforce. And so employers have got a significant part to play in trying to tackle the unequal impact of coronavirus in the workplace. Part of that being working to break down the practices and the policies that may facilitate discriminatory or biased decision-making in those areas. And that shouldn't be seen as a luxurious use of time, because ultimately we need a conscious focus on moving diversity, equality, inclusion, and anti-racism forward. And again, I need to stress, even in this time of crisis, otherwise we're going to miss the opportunity to make real and lasting change and impact the recovery of groups that are typically left out of the conversation. In reality, the inclusion piece is getting a lot of focus, which makes sense. You know, the health and well-being of our staff has become an issue of strategic importance to leadership, very much so, and it makes a lot of sense. You know, how are we coping with remote work? What support do we need? How do our personal circumstances affect how well we perform or participate? You know, these are fantastic questions that are being asked by leaders wanting to support their workforce through what is a really difficult time, and that's great. Some organisations have used inclusion as a means to paper over their lack of diversity and equality progress. Well, others have really leveraged the focus on inclusion for the good, you know, as a method to shine a spotlight on diversity and equality as well. And broadly speaking, that's where we are. It's a mix. Pockets of action, some pushback, some fatigue, frankly, you know, good intentions, lots of talk, people not willing to commit, people not knowing how to commit. It's a total mix. It's a total mix. But as we move forward, we need to have diversity, equality, inclusion, and anti-racism at the top of our agendas. And when I talk about those four things, equality, diversity, inclusion, and anti-racism, which I'm going to have to say a lot now because acronyms not allowed, we need to approach them as a separate, each as a separate and equal part of the story. So focusing on one aspect doesn't remove the need to focus on the others. They're of equal importance in this journey to recovery. And then there's the tech piece. So COVID is accelerating the rate at which we're moving towards and adopting new technologies. It's also shone a light on the need for more digital skills and enhanced digital capability in some areas. You know, whether that's virtual meetings, whether we're looking at automated factories or digital marketing, or actively, you know, joining the fight to cure the pandemic and limit its impact, digital technology and therefore digital skills are going to be a key aspect of our recovery. Now, this accelerated shift means that the pace at which new opportunities could be created is accelerated, which is great. Conversely, it means that the rate at which people could be left behind has also accelerated, and we've got to bear that in mind. The current skills gap could widen. As well as this, the type and the depth of digital skills that are needed to form the bedrock of the new skills base for what comes next has jumped up in complexity, and we need to keep pace with that. We need to be thinking about the range of digital skills from the very basic engagement with tech to digital marketing right through to AI and automation and other emerging technologies. So what does that mean? It means we need to focus on four aspects really. So first, retraining for people to mitigate displacement. That's really important. Second, education and training and provision of skills development for the jobs of the future. We've got to be thinking about future-proofing that skills base. Third, we've got to provide a pathway into higher skilled, and so higher paid, tech opportunities for people that are typically underrepresented, to increase their participation, to increase the productivity of people who are historically underemployed. And fourth, we've got to provide support to organisations so that their equality, diversity, inclusion and anti-racism agendas are linked to their digital skills strategies, and that they can do that and then they have the space, the time, the funding to do those things. And these are four areas where our focus must be, so that we can also help organisations in acquiring and developing the skills that they need to take advantage of the new technologies and the new opportunities that those present on the road from survival to recovery to growth. So when we put it all together and we think about, you know, this shift towards digital, automation, smart and intelligent technologies, it's all about increasing the employability and skills of the future workforce. You know, how can we as people of the LEP support businesses that are really struggling to make equality, diversity and inclusion a priority in this time, or to maintain it as one? You know, making sure that employment opportunities are characterised by genuine equal access, and where the principle of equality is insufficient, we need to think about equity instead. You know, we've got to ensure that training and retraining opportunities across the board are supporting groups from underrepresented, marginalised and underemployed parts of our population. And then we need to look inward. You know, we need to look at ourselves, do some internal soul searching, look at our own structures, look at our own organisations, who's at the top, what's the representation within our own organisation, and what does diversity mean to us? You know, gender diversity is fantastic and important, but we need more than that. We need more people of colour, we need more people with disabilities, and we need to drive to hear more from people with different voices and from people with different experiences and different perspectives. You know, when we're going out to tender for bids, or, you know, we're allocating grants, what are we asking of the organisations that want to work with us and represent us? What are we doing to ensure that they are active in regards to equality, diversity, inclusion and anti-racism? How are we making sure that we're supporting minority-owned businesses in this time when the impact on them is compounded? You know, what are we doing to ensure that our work supports and promotes businesses in this region with their equality, diversity, inclusion, and anti-racism goals? And what data, to echo Denise, what data are we collecting to make sure that we're on the right track and that we're doing the right thing? If we don't use our positions as leaders and use the let voice, to steal a phrase from Adam, to support and push the message and take action, which demonstrates that these things are key to recovery, then we've actually got no right to ask other organisations to do it too. You know, so if we're not having this conversation at board level, that's a problem. Because we need to be talking about it. If we are, brilliant, but keep going and keep pushing for more. You know, this stuff is critical and we have to be practicing what we preach, all of us. You know, we need to start having the same difficult conversations internally that we're encouraging other organisations to have externally. And that's really, really important. It sounds like a lot because it is, but it's also a massive opportunity if we collaborate and we act with purpose. I think our collective impact could be incredible. So let's do that. Let's share our knowledge. Let's work together, because we have to stop just saying stuff. You know, because when we recover, which we will, if we haven't ensured that diversity, equality, inclusion, and anti-racism are a part of all of our practices and our policies and the way we operate going forward, there will be some real issues. We're talking about some of them now, which is great, but we can't take our foot off the gas, because we have to preempt and prevent these things becoming a problem. You know, that's the bias, the racism, the ageism, ableism, sexism, all the isms and phobias that manifest in redundancies, furlough, and other forms of displacement. That's in the dispersal of training and retraining opportunities. Who do we view as groups and people with potential? That's in the algorithms, in our data. That's in the assumptions that we base our decisions on, all of it. So yeah, you know, there's a lot of work to do. But, you know, the thing about reimagining and taking a stance on action to become a more diverse and innovative UK is that we can make it what we want it to be. And that's actually an incredible opportunity. But with that opportunity comes the responsibility to own where we are and the things that got us here, and to make a commitment to take action, to make the words diversity, inclusion, equality, and anti-racism the watchwords and the starting point for everything we do. That's all from me. So thank you very much. I hope that's enough. Thank you very much for giving me the chance to share my thoughts with you guys today.
Thank you so much, Kit, and thank you so much, Denise. I think, as Adam said earlier on, Chris said earlier on, I'm Deputy Chair of the LEP, on Sarah Dance, and it will come as no surprise to you all that this area of discussion is a topic that I'm very passionate about, and one that, as you talked about earlier, it comes from leadership, and it is something that I hope we as a LEP will continue to lead upon. I'm very conscious of time. My task is to field some questions to you. There have been several questions on the Q&A section, so we've probably only got time for a couple. But one of the questions that came up, which is always controversial and interesting, which is that, you know, there are some people that say who argue that the best person for the job should be appointed, rather than seeking a particular characteristic based on gender or race or disability or any other protected characteristic. What would you say to those people, Denise or Kit?
Look, you know, the British business has great faith in meritocracy, and you know, frankly, I think when we look at where we are now, certainly where we started in 2010, we have to question that, really. You know, unless you believe that men are entitled to the vast majority of our leadership jobs, then, you know, it cannot be a meritocracy. We do not have a meritocracy. We have a meritocracy that has as its foundation stones inherent bias. So I think, you know, whenever I hear this all the time from women, oh, I'm worried that I just got appointed the job because I'm women. I've never heard a man say that to me. Yet, you know, for sure, Many men will be in posts they're in now because they are men. Yet nobody's questioned that for decades, still doesn't question that. You know, when a man gets appointed now, nobody says, oh, that's because he's a man and the CEO wanted a man, you know. And I think we just have to move away from all of that. You know, the facts speak for themselves. As I said earlier, 65% of all of our 23,000 leadership roles are still going to men. You know, why isn't it 50-50? We've been working this pretty hard. The pipeline of credible, competent women is full to overflowing, but they don't get picked. And that is because of some of the very complex things that we've talked about, that we all struggle and suffer with. And that's why education on this subject is so key, so that we understand gender stereotyping, we understand bias in the selection process, and we're able to create systematic, structural constructs that allow us to overcome that, to identify it and to overcome it. You know, of course it's the best person for the job, but we have talented people who are women, ethnic minorities, who are gay, lesbian, who are disabled, who come from every protected characteristic, and we know that the opportunity is not there for them, so we don't have a meritocracy.
Thank you. And then just finally, one last question quickly. Samir has asked about has stated about the Ben Page from Ipsos Mori has put out this morning the results of their racism sentiment survey, and it looks like while 30% of white people say Britain is a racist country, the majority of black and ethnic minority people think that it is completely racist. So how do we ensure good representation in our region and at Selep? And I think Kit, you answered some of those questions earlier on, but I'd like to ask you that challenge.
Remember to unmute. It's tough, isn't it? Because we do have different perspectives, and actually the results of those kinds of surveys aren't surprising, and it's ensuring representation in the Selep is really tough because because of our demographics. So we do have a challenge, but as Denise was saying on a number of occasions, that the talent is out there. There are good people with from different groups that exist, and we have to change our perception first of all of what good looks like, and we also have to work a little bit harder to look in places that we don't ordinarily look. If you only go shopping in Waitrose, you're not going to find anything from another store. So you have to look in all of them, and you have to be willing to take a look at those other people and people from other perspectives, and actually to start understanding the fact that people have different experiences which lead them to view unfortunately to view this the country as racist. I imagine that there's no one else on this panel has had to change their name to get a job when I have, because Okite Awievu didn't get a single job interview even though she had the same CV as Kit Awievu, and that is just a fact. And these are things that we have to understand when we hear those kind of results. We can't dismiss that and say, well, of course they do, that they're different. It's actually, but why is that? What is their experience? How do I find people of difference and understand their perspective? That's hard work though. Because a lot of the reason why it doesn't get done is because it's hard, maybe it takes some money, whatever it might be, but we've got to put in the time, the effort, the money to make sure that we're actually bringing people along with us if we want that viewpoint to change.
Thank you. Sorry, Denise. Yeah.
Can I just add to that? I think that's a great answer, Kit. I just wanted to say that, the vast majority of people, whether we're talking about leaders or population, are not racist or not sexist, but what the bit of education that we haven't yet got is that people who would say that are well-meaning people who are trying really hard, but until you understand this subject, until you are informed on this subject and equipped with the right arguments, tools, basic information, you can't be anti-racist, you can't be anti-sexist, you can't be an upstander. And I think that's the opportunity that we have with, you know, not just our business leaders, but with the population at large, actually, to convert well-meaning, innocent bystanders into now upstanders on this topic. And that's the next wave, and that's what we need, and that's what we're trying to encourage certainly all business leaders to get there.
Thank you both so much. It's been absolutely brilliant to hear you. I can't thank you enough. As you probably can understand, this is an area, as I've said earlier, that I'm particularly passionate about. And from my angle, I absolutely will commit to some of those things in my leadership role as Deputy Chair. So I look forward to working with all of the board more on this subject area. I know that we haven't been able to address all of the questions, but we will do. We'll share a note online alongside the AGM recording. So please do look there if we haven't been able to get to your questions. The next steps, I believe, as well as me being really committed for our board, are for us to really carefully consider all of the issues that have been raised today. And not just in the composition of the boards, as we've talked about, but actually, as Kit also mentioned, in the way that our working groups work, in the way that our investment decisions are made, in any of the wider work that we really do that benefit the whole of all of the communities across the South East. I think it's so important. And one of the things that I will absolutely commit to us doing is to embrace the conversations from the learning today, and to hopefully take this forward with the board, if the rest of the board are willing, into a session with our board and all levels of operation to examine what specific steps we need to undertake. There is no doubt that looking forward to the next year, we are going to be facing, all of us as businesses, as individuals, as communities, a really challenging time. But as someone said, and Kit alluded to earlier, knowledge is power and data is power. So it is really important that the data that we gather as a LEP, it informs our renewal and recovery strategy. So we will be digging deep into our data and analysing it to seek to understand our communities better and ensure that we really create the opportunities in the future. So as I bring this AGM to a close, just a few reminders. All of the slides and the webinar recordings will be shared with you all as delegates. And please do, and it will be on our websites, please do share with others. We'd welcome that. For those of you who are going to be part of the LEP board meeting, you need to close this connection and go on to the other connection that you've been sent. And finally, but no means by last, a few thank yous. Thank you to our speakers, and thank you to our fantastic chair, Chris Brodie, who for all that he does. He is the most amazing man. Thank you to all of you as board members who do so much for the LEP. Without your knowledge, without your guidance, without your expertise, we would be nothing. So thank you very much. Thank you, of course, also to all of the staff at the LEP and who have worked so hard with us in such challenging times. You know, special thanks to Adam and also to Zoe, who's done all of the work behind the scenes for today. So thank you very much for that. And finally, thank you to all of you as attendees for coming today. Please do sign up to our newsletter, to our Twitter feed, to our LinkedIn, and to keep up to date with our partnership, with the partnership and the work of the partnership, and contribute to some of the ideas and discussions that we have going forwards. Thank you all very much for coming to today.
Sarah, thanks very much. Can I just leave you with one personal perspective, actually, on both those two issues, both that we just discussed, which has certainly, as I've been thinking about it over the last, really since the shooting in Minnesota, etc., but also it applies to justice and equality more generally. For people like me, I think that what's been said to me about it is that actually, you know what? Silence is complicity. So if we do nothing, that is actually perpetuating the system. So it's down to people like all of us, but I particularly think about it in my own context, is that if you're silent, or if you do nothing, you're part of the system. And it's that which we have to break down. So this, I hope what we've done today is proving that we're not being silent on this issue. And that's the only thought I wanted to leave people with, because it certainly has been very powerful in the way that my attitude over the last 3 or 4 months, particularly since what's been going on in Minnesota, but it applies more generally. You have to speak out, and you actually have to do. Thank you. See you aboard in 10 minutes or so. Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.